Hey, folks. We are now live on both YouTube and Instagram at the same time. This is crazy. I didn't know such things were possible, but lo and behold, here we are streaming in two places all at once. And it was really just as simple as pulling out two devices and setting them against each other. And yes, that's all that I did. So with lots of hard work and research, you too can be a technological expert just as myself. I like to think that if times get rough, I could probably make a living doing this, solving such problems. And so, yeah, it is a spiritual gift. It is a spiritual gift. So I see some folks jumping in over on Instagram right now. How y'all doing? Doing good. Y'all can comment, say something or not. You can just ignore it. I hope you're doing good. I'm glad that y'all are here. So anyway, Luke, why are you face palming me right now? Honestly, that's disrespectful. I can't believe that. But anyways, somebody just sent a request to be in my live video. I don't know who these people are. So no. Anyways, the Point FBCIT. Has anybody ever heard of them? I don't know who that is. Strange that they would show up at such an hour. Anyways, oh well. So anyway, so I am social distancing here at my home. As you can see, I have a nice 11 pointer in the background. I hope that doesn't bother anybody. I hope that we're all cool with that and that everybody's, just kind of chill about that. I also have the signs, which I explained last time. So anyways, if you don't know what the signs are, then just go back and look at the last one. You'll also see directly over my shoulder what looks like a skunk tail. That's not a skunk tail. That is a deer tail. When I was a kid, I thought that would be fun to keep. I don't really know why, but I've got it. And yeah, so yes, welcome to my room of dead animals. That's where we are right now. So sorry if that bothers you. I didn't intend to. This is just where I live. And Kara, I would have had these things spread out all around the house, so you wouldn't have had to see, all of them all at once. But Kara will not let me put my things up around the house. They will just, so they all got crammed in here. So anyways, now somebody named Justin Kinley sent a request to be in my live video. I don't know him either. So no. Anyways. Sorry about it. You only see one what, Luke? You talking about my dead animals? There's also a duck in here too. So yeah. Been duck hunting like once in my life. And that was it. So it was a lot of fun. I'd do it again if I got the chance. Hunting is fun. It's a good skill to have right now too, seeing that grocery stores are getting ravaged by people who seem to think the apocalypse is upon us. You never know. Good to have some meat in the freezer and all. Just saying. But anyways, enough of all of that talk. I suppose that we should probably move on to more serious matters by now. That would probably be a good thing for us to do, would it not? So I've been wrestling with I guess how to close out this little walk through John 11, and right now we're almost to the end of the chapter. I think I'm just going to keep walking, maybe all the way up through the very end, but we're not going to do all of that all at once. That'd be a lot to work on. But I want to break it down in just little pieces right quick. So if you would, I hope this will encourage you, but go ahead and flip over to John 11, verse 38. As we've done with sort of the last few meetings that we've had on here, if you have any kinds of, I love that we can just kind of interact, that you can keep chatting with me on this. So if you have any kinds of questions or comments about what I'm talking about, just throw those up there. I'd be happy to read those and hear those Be super cool if you guys kind of participate a little bit with me. So John chapter 11, verse 38, we've been walking through the story of Jesus raising Lazarus, and we've really taken our time and gone slowly through this. And so right now we're kind of coming to, I guess, the famous part of the story, the part where Jesus actually raises Lazarus. And I think it's going to be just a very timely word for our situation today. So this is what it says in verse 38. It says, "Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. 'Remove the stone,' Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, 'Lord, there's already a stench because he's been dead for 4 days.' Jesus said to her, 'Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?' So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, 'Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me.' After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, 'Lazarus, come out.' The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips and with his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, 'Unwrap him and let him go.'" That story all on its own just sort of preaches. I don't have to say anything about it. It's awesome enough as it is. I love the story. Maybe one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible. I really really love this story. I think it's so great. But I want us to think. I want us to think about this. Now we've worked through it so far, and we've looked at each of the little pieces and all these sorts of things. And I want you to think about the moment that Jesus is walking into when he walked up to Lazarus's tomb. There's a strange feeling that people get right before a big moment. Like I felt that feeling like when I used to walk out on a football field on Friday nights. I felt that I feel that feeling whenever I get up to preach, like that nervous kind of butterflies feeling. And I'm sure that you guys have felt that too, whether it's like right before you walked out on a field or a court, or right before you got out on stage or something like that. But it's that feeling on the inside that you can't really explain. You can't explain it to somebody else. You can't tell somebody else what it feels like, but we all know what you're talking about. It's that feeling where you're nervous because this is the big moment. This is something that you've been preparing for. This is something that you've been looking forward to. This is something that you've been prepping for. This is something you've been practicing for, and now it's actually about to happen, and you feel the pressure, and it might even feel overwhelming right before, but then it happens. You're on the field, you're on the stage, you're doing what you've been prepping for, and it's time to just ignore the feelings and just do it, to do what you came here to do. I think that in some ways that sort of explains Jesus up to this point. Jesus has been preparing for this moment. And if you looked at it, we've seen Jesus sharing in the sorrow. We've seen him willingly taking on and sharing in the pain and the havoc that has been brought about by the death of Lazarus. And Jesus is very emotional all throughout this story, but it finally gets here, and he's about to do what he came to do. It's like the moment's here. It's about to happen. And nobody but Jesus understands how big this moment actually is. Like, they thought this was just a funeral. And a funeral all on its own is a big moment. I mean, if you've been to a funeral before, you know that, funerals are, I mean, there's a lot of emotional energy there. Like, you get what I'm saying. But Jesus knows that this is bigger than just a funeral, because he knows what he's about to do on the one hand, but he also knows how people are about to respond to what he will do. Jesus is already in danger just being there, because there's people in that region that want to kill him. And so he's risking his own life just to be there for Lazarus right now. And so he knows that once he does what he came to do, once he raises Lazarus from the dead, he's going to draw so much attention to himself that he's going to wind up losing his own life. If he raises Lazarus, there's no way for him to hide. If somebody's resurrected, that's going to be all over the news, so to speak. And so all these people that feel threatened by Jesus are now going to feel like he's intolerable. There's not any way now. Only way to get rid, if he raises Lazarus from the dead, then the only way for his enemies to quiet him will be to kill him. And so Jesus knows that this moment is about to be the last straw. This moment will be the one that ultimately sends him to the cross. But he does it anyways. If you look at verses 38 and 39, I'm sorry, 39 and I think just 39. Yeah, it says 39. It says, remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, Lord, there's already a stench because he's been dead for 4 days. Now, the people there were not expecting Lazarus to be raised. They were not expecting Jesus to do anything for Lazarus. They were hoping that he'd come earlier and heal Lazarus, but they weren't expecting Jesus to raise Lazarus from the dead. That was just not on their radar. And it's important to realize that this is not what Jesus is about to do. This is not some kind of like sleight of hand thing. Like it's not like Jesus is about to just do kind of like a magic trick or like, trick people into thinking that Lazarus was dead, but he really wasn't. And that's what some people say. They'll say, well, Lazarus, he wasn't actually dead. He just fainted for 4 days. And people didn't know any better back then. And so they just buried him. And then he woke up right as Jesus arrived. And that's crazy, y'all. That's just not what the story says happened. This man's been dead. He's been wrapped up. He's been buried. And there's a whole process that went into this thing. Like people knew what they were doing. And because he's not just dead, he's stinking. And if he stinks, that means that he's rotting. Like his body has begun to decompose. Like if you've ever been driving down the road and you've seen roadkill, not just like fresh roadkill, but roadkill that's been there for a few days, it's like roll up the windows. That stinks. It's disgusting. It's really, really gross. I had these roommates in college who were and still are terrible people, and they thought that it would be hilarious to drive around until they found I kid you not, this happened, found a dead deer and threw it in the back of my truck. And so they got to me and they're like, Eli, you need to go outside and check on your truck. So I went outside and I kid you not, as soon as I opened the door of our dorm, my truck is like 30 yards away. Like, I mean, it's a good ways away. As soon as I opened up the door, the smell hit me. Like this deer literally made the whole parking lot stink. And this thing wasn't like weeks old or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't visibly rotting. It didn't look bloody or mangled or anything like that. It just looked like a regular old deer. But this thing had been dead for a few days. And because it had been dead, this thing started to bloat up and stink. I mean, like it really, really stunk. It really, really was gross. You couldn't have done CPR and saved that deer. Like you couldn't have shocked that thing back to life. Like, oh, we're gonna do a medical procedure and bring this thing back. Like this thing is not just dead. This thing is dead and rotten and stinking. Like this was gross. And that's where Lazarus was. Lazarus is very dead. He's not just mostly dead. He is very dead. There's nothing left that can be done for him. He is dead and rotten and stinking. And so people are hopeless all around him. They had hope now these people had hope in the resurrection at the end of time, but at that present moment, there was nothing in their minds that could be done for Lazarus. He's dead and rotten. He's gone. And now we might say, being super spiritual, but they saw Jesus feed 5,000. But they saw him walk on water. But they saw him open the eyes of a blind man. They should have known what Jesus was capable of. But you see, death is a whole different thing, because it's one thing to heal a sick person. You know, our doctors do that all the time, even though it's not necessarily like a miraculous thing. They heal people. They do that all the time. But when you're dead, it's different. As long as you're alive, if you're sick, as long as you're alive, you might have some hope of getting better. Maybe like there'll be some treatment that'll come out. Maybe God will heal. There's always some level of hope if you're alive. But if you're dead, then we kind of just give up hope for you at that point. There's no going back after death. There's no hope of getting better after death. To die is to lose the battle with whatever your illness was. And that's why people are panicked right now by this virus. With other illnesses, we might feel like we have a way to control it. We have a way to fight back because we have, medicines and therapies to cover all kinds of things. But this virus, I think, is freaking people out because we don't really understand it yet. There is no cure. There is no vaccine. There is no treatment. And so even though it's not actually a threat to most of the population, most young folks are going to be unaffected by it. We feel hopeless because we can't control what it does. And we're scared of death because death to us means the end. There's no hope of going back. Well, whether we like to think about it or not, we will all die. Death is the great equalizer because it doesn't matter how rich or how beautiful or how talented or how gifted you are, you will die. And the big question that most of us don't seem to want to think about is how are we going to get out of that grave? The Bible says in Romans 6:23 that the wages of sin is death. Death is a result of our rebellion against God. It is the curse against this world for our disobedience to him. God could have rightly left us to die without hope, but God didn't do that. If you keep reading in the story, it says in verse 40, it says, "Then Jesus said, 'Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?' So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, 'Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this, so that they may believe that you sent me.' After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, 'Lazarus, come out.' The dead man came out bound hand and foot with linen strips, with his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, 'Unwrap him and let him go.'" Even though Jesus knows that this moment will cost him his own life, that this moment will send him to the cross, Jesus said, "Lazarus, come out." And at God's command, even dead men obey. He has the power to speak life back into something that is completely dead. Jesus came to undo sin. Everywhere that he went, the curse of sin was undone. The hungry were fed, cripples walked, blind men saw, storms were calmed down, and dead men lived again because sin and death are undone in the presence of Jesus. Jesus came and he did exactly what he came to do. And that's good news, not only for Lazarus, but for you and me. Because what Jesus does here will send him to the cross. What he does here seals his fate, so to speak. He would go and he would die on a cross so that he could experience death in the fullest and defeat it once and for all. He was killed and he was buried for 3 days, but that grave could not hold him. And just like Jesus gave himself up to save Lazarus, he was really giving himself up ultimately to save you and to save me. And by his death and resurrection, you and I have hope because Jesus of Nazareth rose from the dead, and his life is now ours. And so, students, what does that mean? It means don't lose hope in God. Never, ever give up hope in God no matter what, because things might get hard. Your parents might lose a job. Someone you know might get sick. Someone that you love might even die. And you might find yourself in a situation that appears hopeless. By all obvious evidence, it looks hopeless. But remember, students, your God raises the dead. Your God can do the impossible, and he's already promised you something that not even death can take away. He's promised you an inheritance that thieves cannot steal, that rust cannot destroy, and that is eternal life with him. So you have hope that cannot be taken away. So never, ever, ever give up hope. If I go back and I look at verse 41, Jesus prayed before he called out Lazarus and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. And you might ask, well, when did Jesus pray? Because Jesus hasn't prayed out loud in this whole story. So what does he even mean by that? Well, even if he wasn't praying out loud, Jesus's conversation with his Father never stops. Jesus is always in communication with his Father. And so even for Jesus, all the signs and the miracles that he does come out of the power of prayer because he is in constant communication with God. He's working through his reliance and his dependence on his Father. Now, if Jesus, who was God in the flesh, had to pray constantly, then what do you think you and I should do? We should pray constantly. The Bible tells us to pray without ceasing, but I would just be curious to see who would be honest. How many of us pray every day, once a day, much less pray without ceasing? And I don't mean blessing the food. I mean actually praying every day. I'm willing to bet that most of us don't pray every day. And really what that betrays, what that tells me, is that our lack of hope probably comes out of our lack of prayer. On Friday, I was home alone most of the day, and because I was just kind of at the house, I kept opening up my phone and checking Twitter. That's how I know that most of y'all probably aren't on Twitter, but that's how I keep up with just what's going on in the world, how I keep up with news and all that sort of stuff. And I kept getting on, and every time I got on, it was like there was more and more bad news. It was like a really, really depressing Friday. It just seemed like more cases of this virus, more deaths, longer shutdowns, all of this stuff. Like it was just really, really a bad day. And that started to make me, like, it actually changed my mood. It started to make me feel anxious. It started to make me feel worried. It started to make me feel frustrated. And I kept going back and looking again on my phone, thinking that maybe this time there would be some good news on my phone that would make me feel better. But every time I checked, I only got more and more anxious. I only got more and more worried. And this went on the whole day until I was just in a foul mood by the end of the day. And so I finally sort of wised up and said to myself, why am I looking for hope in the news? Why do I expect relief to come through my phone right now? Because the thing that brought me hope on that day wasn't my phone. It came to me when I got on my knees. When I finally got off my phone late in the day and decided to pray about what started happening, suddenly I felt hopeful again. Suddenly I felt peace again because I realized, I'm looking in all the wrong places for relief right now. Now, I sat there and I prayed, and it wasn't like I said amen and all of a sudden everything was great and everything was fixed. Like obviously you can look around and see we're still in the middle of a miniature crisis here. But I remembered that in spite of my problems, in spite of the issues going on, I'm in the hands of a God who overpowered the grave. And I have a hope that no virus can ever, ever take away. And so if you're in the middle of a crisis right now, remember where your hope is and get on your knees and pray. This world right now is going crazy because there's a bunch of hopeless people out there. But you're here and you are the church of the resurrected Jesus. And most of you students, y'all are out of school right now. And so you've got some extra time on your hands. Don't spend that time on a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. Don't spend your whole day playing video games. Don't spend your whole day on YouTube. Don't spend your whole day taking selfies or doing whatever it is that you do. Do something that matters. Don't spend the day worrying. Don't spend the day thinking and trying to figure out what's going to happen and trying to guess the future. Don't act like people who don't have a hope beyond this life. Remember where your hope is and take some of that time that you've got and get on your knees and pray. If you want to make a difference in your life, if you want to make a difference in some other people's lives, then get on your knees and pray. And don't you ever give up hope. No matter how bad it gets, no matter what happens, you've got a God that can fix it. And so depend on him in this time. Lean on him in this time. Find hope in him. Don't look for hope in the news. Don't look for hope at school. Don't look for hope in your friends. Don't look for hope online. Look for hope in the God who raises the dead. And you'll find a hope that absolutely nothing can ever take away. I hope that word encourages you as much as it encouraged me, because I'll tell you that I'm preaching to myself as much as I am to anybody else right now. I really hope that lifted you up. That's all that I got to say. I can say a quick prayer, and then if y'all want to keep hanging out on here, I can hang out for a few minutes longer. If y'all got something to say, throw it up in the comments. I'd love to talk with you. Let's say a prayer right quick. Father, thank you for bringing us here together today. Thank you for looking out for us in this, God. And thank you most of all for sending your son, Jesus, to go through the pains of death itself so that he could overcome it. God, we're thankful that there is no grave that can hold us down, God, because the life of Jesus cannot be taken away. Thank you for this wonderful hope. God, as we navigate this crisis right now, we ask that you would allow us to live out that hope, to be the people that you want us to be, to act like people who have a resurrection hope in this time. God, may we shine brightest in the dark. It's in your name that we ask this. Amen. Amen. All righty, guys. I see a couple of y'all are still hanging around. I see Bree on there. What's up, Bree? I see Lucas still hanging around with us. I saw somebody else, but I think I've lost them. They seem to have disappeared. I see we got somebody over here on YouTube as well. I don't know who you are, but I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for coming out tonight. I hope that you were encouraged, and encourages me to have you guys out here with me, being a part of this. I hope it lifted you up. If you're still on, I want to ask you guys a question, just because I'm genuinely curious. Obviously, I just railed against wasting your time on things that don't matter and all. But I am curious just to know, like, what are some things that you guys are doing right now to sort of pass the time? As you can see, I have my guitar in the background. And that's something that I've been working on a little bit with a little bit of time that I've had. I'm curious, anybody do anything interesting to pass the time? Fishing. I hope to go fishing soon. That's the thing. That's what I think I'm going to work on. Learn to play guitar and fish. Anybody else doing anything interesting right now? Throw it up in the comments. Let me know. I'm just curious to know what people are doing. I'm not going to judge you. Why would I judge you? I have no reason to judge you. Because there's some good things to do. If I just sit there, like I've done this before, like if I, like some people talk about vegging out, if I just sit there and become a vegetable and, watch TV or play on my phone all day, I feel worse by the end of the day. I don't feel like rested. I don't feel rejuvenated. I have to like do something that makes me feel like I accomplished something with my day. Even if that's just like, fishing. I know fishing is not like a super productive thing to do, but it does make me feel, better. I feel like I did something that was, good and worthwhile. Let's see, they're playing board games and stuff. Yeah, that's good. I haven't done any board games in a while. Me and my wife like to play those, play cards. Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. So, well, folks, I think that things are kind of winding down at this point. Like I said, I hope that y'all were encouraged. I hope that you enjoyed the message. That said, I think I'm going to wrap things up. Y'all know if you ever need me, you can reach me here on Instagram. You can reach out on Facebook. A lot of y'all have my phone number. Don't hesitate to give me a call. I'd love to pray with you guys if you need anything and to help you out in any way. Love y'all, and I hope y'all have a wonderful night.